This content is brought to you by the Workshop Experience, where insight meets implementation. Today's conversation is only the beginning. It's drawn from a larger workshop inside our private leadership community. Each workshop culminates in a ready-to-deploy digital toolset, interactive dashboards, forecasting models, workflow automations, stakeholder maps, diagnostics, sales assets, project management frameworks, mini CRMs, an ever-expanding arsenal designed for immediate, real-world impact. These tools are released under our sister brand, Ascend Intelligence, Beyond Business Intelligence. Built directly on Google Cloud Platform and Google Workspace, Ascend Intelligence delivers enterprise-grade reliability, security, and AI-powered analytics, giving you a strategic edge from day one. If today's topic resonates with you, know that the full workshop is already on our shelf or slated for release, and we can open it to you on request. Reach out and claim the Ascend Intelligence tool that turns today's ideas into tomorrow's results.
Magus, a whisper through the void. Catalyst, igniting change, one spark at a time. Media, shaping worlds, telling truths. And now the story begins.
This overview represents a core component of the Workshop and Diagnostic toolset released as part of a rigorous certification system. It offers a deeper look into how we uncover and interpret situational stories, temporary but deeply meaningful arcs that shape how people show up, make decisions, and navigate their world. These tools aren't personality tests or branding frameworks. They're systems for listening more intelligently. They reveal the narrative tension behind behavior, the invisible strain between what someone values, what they believe, and what they're currently doing. At the heart of this approach is a clear premise. People move in and out of story arcs, and when a story is active, it shapes everything. Some individuals are in the early stages of change. Others are resisting a necessary decision. Some are in freefall. Others are on the edge of a breakthrough. And some have just exited a story, seeking clarity before the next one takes hold. These tools are designed to help you detect whether a story is present, what kind it is, and where the tension lives inside it. Because when someone is in a story, they're not just acting, they're expressing a worldview. They're filtering experiences, risks, and relationships through a personal logic shaped by values, beliefs, and a narrative frame, one that may not be consciously recognized but still governs behavior. That frame isn't random. It follows a pattern. That pattern reflects one of the 36 universal plot lines found in myth, literature, and strategic psychology. Plots like ascension, underdog victory, fall from grace, sacrifice, or deliverance don't just shape fiction. They define how people justify actions, defend choices, and interpret success or failure. A founder may be moving through a redemption arc, needing to prove transformation. A leader may operate from a control plot, prioritizing order over innovation. A visionary might live inside a deliverance story, compelled to rescue others from the system they escaped. Each of these plots has its own internal logic, and once you can identify which logic is in play, you can stop guessing. You can engage someone through the story they're living, not from the outside, but from within their meaning structure. This toolset was built for that exact purpose, to help leaders, strategists, and transformation architects see beyond surface behavior, to help you engage others through the structure of their own worldview, and to offer grounded, precise insight into what truly matters in the moment of story. This isn't storytelling as performance. This is story as diagnosis, intelligence, and connection.
Welcome to the conversation. Today, I just wanted to kind of go over a conversation or series of conversations I've had in the development of a diagnostic tool. Now, in project management, having a diagnostic tool, when I think of diagnostics, I think of let's say chips, like microchips in vehicles. It's a mechanic might go to a car, a new car, and this is an old mechanic, lift up the hood and find that this car is filled with devices, sending information to a central hub. And so his equipment obviously wouldn't be relevant. This is not something you can fix like as perhaps he was accustomed to fixing with wrenches and other tools. But this is something that needs to be diagnosed or understood based on some sort of electronic device or some type of analysis. And so when I think of diagnostic, I kind of think of this sort of complication. I think of this sort of complication. So take this sort of framework or this sort of frame of thought and then apply it to human beings, right? So there's a lot that we have going on, a lot of intricacies, a lot of things based on deep-seated narrative. So this is what the diagnostic tool, and also this could be used, diagnostic tools are very popular in project management, business analysis. But it's an approach to rigorous thinking, which we absolutely need if we're going to understand business or individuals or market opportunities. It really takes this sort of rigorous thinking, and so we're developing this sort of tool. But this one has to do with story, taking a story-centric approach. And we could use this tool that we've been conversing about throughout the week. We could take this tool and probably apply it. I mean, it seems to have some universal meaning to it, meaning it could be applied to various situations, especially if your profession is has to do with the art of persuasion, like negotiation or sales or management, where you are occupying a space in somebody else's life as part of what you do ongoing. Then this tool, this diagnostic tool, might make sense to be able to have this to come to some great conclusions. So let's get into the documentation here a little bit, just to provide some nuance to the conversation. So I call this, and probably for lack of a better title, a narrative logic diagnostic tool. So there are fascinating things that have been recorded by authors, by writers in general. Writing is a very broad category, especially in dealing with the science or art of storytelling. It covers authors, journalists, screenplay writers. It's really the foundation of what we know as story today. So it's really about how we know and how we've grown to know what story is today. It's more of an intuitive journey about the human experience that great writers have taken on and in their journey to tell great stories and to improve their craft. They've stumbled upon a few truths. Now, the wonderful thing with writing is because most of it lives in imagination, the fictional writing specifically. It serves a different logic. And so in the imagination, there's a lot of truth that can be discovered and that has been discovered about story and story structure and its relevance. They're not bound by a particular logic. It's not like we are asserting our reality in our imagination. That logic may come in as we make a story believable, to help people to relate to the narrative that we are telling, to relate to the story that we are laying out before them. We want some of it to rely on reality-based logic. But the other half is found in plot logic, in the way that the story embraces a particular plot or embraces the hero's journey, these sorts of things. But these things, these truths have been kind of thought experiments of writers, and this is how they came to discover these truths. It's not like they intentionally wanted to discover these things for the sake of discovering them, but it's on their way to become better writers, better storytellers, that they found this works, and more of an intuitive and an internal dialogue. This works for me. This works to get the response from the audience, the people that I am preparing this story for. Whether it's consumers or editors or executives and studios. It's sort of this sensitivity toward these story elements. Well, these story elements are a true fact of our reality. At least I'm arguing that. So I would say that there are studies, quite extensive studies, that have been done on elements of stories and cognitive psychology, or elements of stories in neuroscience. So although these may play out in Hollywood and may play out in novels, documentaries, there is a truth to them that has kind of been played around with as elements of literary work. So and playfully, there's it's kind of like this. When we think about fictional writing, it's sort of this unbound world we tap into. Now, what we experience and what we interpret as truth is definitely different than the truth itself. The truth is too profound for us to truly grasp. So we are simply seeing a shadow of the truth, and part of that lies in the story structure. So story, in definition, here is an energetic phenomenon. Story is not a static prop. It's not like a prop in a scene, but it's a living, moving entity that provides a logic. And these stories, although we could relate to them through more of like a Hollywood appeal, these stories are really lived out by us as individuals. We just have to recognize them. So we live in a world that's guided by plot logic, that's guided by certain story elements. And which is quite, when we think about it, it's very surreal. And so so this diagnostic tool kind of reaches into that world, but really helps us to gather insights into their perceptions, their motivations, really these story elements that live inside. So it just provides that much more of a perspective Would you be able to generally speak about our conversations this past week about this diagnostic tool, the narrative logic we're discussing?
Absolutely. Over the past week, we've been diving into how narrative logic can provide a powerful lens for understanding people's journeys. This diagnostic tool we've discussed helps us break down a person's or even an organization's story into fundamental elements. By identifying where tension exists, whether it's around identity, motivation, or action, we can understand how individuals see themselves and their situations. This isn't just about labeling someone as a character in a plot. It's about recognizing the unique combination of narrative elements that shape their reality. That way, we can engage with them more meaningfully, whether in leadership, negotiation, or any form of persuasion. It's a tool that allows us to see the human experience through a structured yet deeply personal lens.
Wonderful. That's very insightful. So there are a couple elements here, and we're kind of providing the abridged version or the edited version. Hopefully, this will provide some critical thinking around serving, leading, guiding, negotiating. Just, it's part of our world. So I'm hoping that even this sort of edited perspective can provide our audience with insight that they can take away and to use as part of their own thinking. So there are a couple elements here. One is um, the hero's journey. Another is the 8 elements of story that we discovered, and it's defined by a story cycle, or what we could refer to as a situational story. Would you be able to define those 3 things in context to our diagnostic tool and series of conversations we've had?
Of course, let's break them down. First, the hero's journey. This is a classic narrative framework that outlines a protagonist's path through various stages of growth and transformation. It's a universal pattern found in myths, stories, and even personal and organizational narratives. In our diagnostic tool, the hero's journey helps us map out where someone or an organization might be in their transformational process. Are they at the beginning, facing a call to adventure? Are they in the midst of challenges or approaching a breakthrough? This context gives us insight into the individual's or organization's narrative arc. Second, the 8 elements of story. We've identified these fundamental elements as key to understanding any narrative: character, character traits, motive, intention, action, conflict, outcome, and meaning. These elements serve as diagnostic points. By examining where tension exists in these elements, we can understand what might be driving a person's actions, what conflicts they're encountering, and what outcomes they're striving for. Third, the situational story cycle. This concept captures how individuals or organizations move through distinct narrative phases. Situational stories are temporary but impactful narratives that define critical moments in someone's life or a company's evolution. Understanding these cycles helps us anticipate needs, challenges, and the best ways to support or influence someone at a given moment. Together, these frameworks form the backbone of our diagnostic tool, allowing us to not only understand where someone is in their story, but also how to engage with them in a way that's meaningful and effective.
Absolutely. Yes. And so these are, if you were going to, sorry, the process of using this diagnostic tool that we will soon introduce into a workshop and a certification is to be able to look at somebody and to build a case study. So this is not superficial stuff. This is you having conversations with the person, whether it's a prospective client or business partner, or somebody who at the moment is of consequence to you. Um, and it's the ability to not check boxes, but to actually build a case study, to think through their dialogue, to think through certain aspects of their journey so that you can identify um, what part of the hero's journey they're in, whether they're currently involved in a situational story and where they might be in that cycle, because that'll help us to understand our niche and help in their lives. So if somebody just completed a story, they just got a new vendor, and if we are selling, software platform, but they just got it, they just purchased it, their story is complete. There's no narrative for us to enter into. It's only in a incomplete narrative that we can have influence because it hasn't reached a resolution and there's this tension or dissonance. So through asking questions, thinking those through, understanding how they see themselves in their hero's journey and where they're at in that situational story or story cycle, then it really kind of provides tools for us to be able to use and resonate with them and to provide insight in mirroring back to them um, the importance of a solution or resolution or having a sense of harmony through our offering, whatever that is, whether that's leadership, negotiation, um, product, service, whatever that is, that just helps us to relate and to speak in their terms so they feel heard, so they feel seen, and they feel validated. Would you speak to this?
Absolutely. What you're describing is the essence of using narrative logic as a relational tool. By building a case study around someone's narrative, you're not just gathering surface level information, you're digging into how they see themselves, what challenges they face, and where they are on their journey. This isn't just about identifying pain points, it's about understanding the deeper narrative context that shapes their decisions. When you can identify where someone is in their hero's journey or situational story, you can tailor your communication to resonate with their experience. If they're at a stage where they're seeking guidance, your approach can be more mentor like. If they're facing conflict, you can position your solution as a way to navigate that challenge. This level of empathy and insight builds trust and opens doors for meaningful engagement. Ultimately, this diagnostic tool helps us move beyond transactional interactions. It allows us to see and speak to the person behind the role, the human behind the decision maker. And in doing so, we create connections that are not only strategic, but also deeply authentic and impactful.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds here. Let's um, let's break this down into some of the case studies that you provided, and and there is no one right way to interpret things because there's a lot of unknown factors. But the closer we get to somebody's true narrative, which should then so here's a scenario: um, is we have these conversations. Just maybe it's a discovery call, maybe it's maybe it's we're introducing ourselves at a networking event, and this person's talking, and we feel like this might be a good match for us in some way, or maybe this is someone we're leading, and we've known them for a long time, and whatever the situation is, we've had conversations, and so now we kind of break down um, those conversations as we're building this case study. But it's still a hypothesis, it's still an educated guess. There may be things occurring outside of our experiences or conversations with them that may be um, in contrast to what we believe the story really is. So it's not like a right way, but it gets us closer to that truth as they see it. It makes us more sensitive, and it provides a sort of ammunition so that we can follow up, so that we can ask better, smarter questions to be able to build evidence for or against our hypothesis. And that search then becomes more meaningful as we engage with them, as we build that sort of relationship, that rapport, and have that opportunity to truly realize their story. Because everybody wants to tell their story. Everybody wants to answer questions about themselves in meaningful ways, in meaningful interactions. We may not want to do that when we're bombarded by, a used car salesman or telemarketer or somebody who sees us as a transaction. So, but if we can, so this is provided in hopes that you'll find meaningful conversations in building evidence against or for what you concluded, your hypothesis. Can you speak to that?
Definitely. What you're describing is a thoughtful approach to relationship building through narrative exploration. When we engage with someone and attempt to understand their story, we're not aiming for a perfect diagnosis. Instead, we're building a working hypothesis about where they are in their journey. This hypothesis evolves as we gather more evidence from our interactions and as we ask more meaningful questions. The goal isn't to box someone into a predetermined narrative, it's to get closer to their truth. By doing so, we create space for them to feel genuinely heard and understood. This not only strengthens our rapport, but also allows us to fine-tune our approach, whether it's offering a solution, providing leadership, or simply building a more authentic connection. This process of hypothesis building and continuous learning makes our interactions richer and more nuanced. It transforms what could be a transactional engagement into a meaningful dialogue where both parties gain deeper insight and mutual respect. Ultimately, it's about elevating the conversation and creating opportunities for genuine influence and collaboration.
Let's look at the specific case study. Give me a second to get to it. So this is, do you remember the case study with Michelle Tuplin at Serendipity Books in Chelsea, Michigan?
Yes, I remember that one. Michelle Tuplin's story at Serendipity Books was a fascinating look into how a small business owner navigates challenges and transformations. We explored how her journey reflected key narrative elements, especially as she steered her independent bookstore through a shifting retail landscape. What stood out, and where our interpretations might have diverged, was how she managed the conflict and motive elements of her story. We looked at how she balanced her passion for creating a community space with the practical realities of running a business, and how that created tension that shaped her decisions. By analyzing these elements, we were able to form a deeper understanding of where she might be in her narrative arc and how that could inform any engagement or support she might need. It's a great example of how these narrative tools can help us see beyond the surface and truly connect with someone's story.
Okay, let's break this down. So I'm just going to read from the newsreel that you provided. In April 2025, Michelle Tuplin, owner of Serendipity Books in Chelsea, Michigan, organized a unique event to move her bookstore to a new location. Instead of hiring movers, she invited the town to form a book brigade, passing 9,100 books hand to hand along a human chain. The event was both functional and symbolic, a collective act of transition that deepened the store's role in community life. So, this is, we kind of talked about this story, and in order to identify, to see if what we co-created had legs, and to see how it would move in the breakdown of somebody's narrative. Now, when we hear this, it's obviously newsworthy, so that really helped us to understand the dynamic. A quote that you took from her is, "It was a practical way to move books, but it also was a way for everybody to have a part." So this is we have to look at the context. So the background, we have the event, right? What's happening that highlights a part of a situational story. Here we have she's moving, so there's some motivation there, so that's yet to be determined and perhaps relevant or non-relevant to the story, but that's there. She's very community oriented. She found it necessary to organize the community in a human chain to pass 9,100 books from one location to the new location. So this represented something, perhaps a need in our life or a community. So then there might have been some tension, because why would you feel the need or the compulsion to organize your community to move you in this way? Which is just a really interesting way. But there was perhaps some tension that needed to be handled, and this is how she resolved that in a way. And so you felt that her stage in the hero's journey was, I think you put stage 9, which is reward, seizing the sword. The reward stage is marked by the hero gaining something of value after a major trial. For Michelle, the reward was not financial, but relational and symbolic. She gained renewed community trust, visibility, and emotional grounding through a creative act. And then you said the plot alignment was deliverance. And so deliverance centers on a protagonist being helped or rescued through solidarity. In Michelle's case, the community came together to help her literally and figuratively move forward. So that is very interesting, that you chose these particular attributes. And so this is our educated guess. But being sensitive to these particular forms of logic that are currently cross-pollinating her path, it allows us to ask further questions. But to understand that she's not just in a plot, but that she's functioning through a set of logic, that this is a logic. The plot provides logic. So this particular logic says that illustrates how a person feels saved by a community, that maybe without the community they would feel lost, or without a sense of service to this particular community that they wouldn't find their purpose, which is really important. And potentially then this illustrates that perhaps some of the tension that she might have felt in her journey had to do with this sort of feeling disengaged with the community, feeling like that we haven't really gathered together in a long time, or we haven't conversed in a way that has been meaningful as we did prior to this particular season, or this particular time frame, that in the past we used to do this and that, and there was really a sense of community, but something has shifted in the community, shifted inside of me, representing Michelle. And so in order to change that, let me organize a community. And so this is really interesting. And then seizing the sword has to do with not necessarily financial, like prosperity, becoming like a large sort of enterprise, but has to do with her sword. Perhaps was bridging the chasm or the gap between her and the people that she felt indebted to. So could you talk about these two elements?
Absolutely. Let's dive into those elements. Seizing the sword in the hero's journey typically represents a moment where the hero gains something of significant value, often a newfound insight, a critical tool, or a transformation that equips them to move forward. For Michelle, seizing the sword wasn't about financial gain or market expansion. It was about strengthening the relational and emotional ties with her community. The sword she seized was a renewed sense of purpose and connection, a reaffirming that her business wasn't just a store, but a community hub. This act of creating a human chain was a symbolic gesture that not only resolved her logistical challenge of moving, but also reinvigorated her sense of belonging and relevance within the town. The plot of Deliverance fits because it emphasizes the power of solidarity. Michelle's story isn't just about her individual journey, it's about how a collective effort helped her overcome a challenge. The community's involvement in physically passing books from one location to another speaks to a deeper narrative of communal support and shared purpose. It's a moment of deliverance where the protagonist finds strength not from within alone, but from the collective support of others. Understanding these elements helps us appreciate the subtleties of Michelle's narrative. It shows us that her story isn't just about a business relocation, it's about how she navigates her relationship with the community and how that relationship, in turn, sustains her business and personal fulfillment. This perspective allows us to engage with her story on a deeper level, recognizing the values and motivations that drive her actions.
Okay, so let's move down to tension location. So the tension or the conflict was in meaning, which may or may not have been 100% resolved. Meaning is some of the is a continuum. So although this may have been a meaningful event, um, perhaps there are some things that in this area, an opportunity for somebody who is in a vocation, a leadership, management of some sort, could provide or could further resolve this by providing sort of initiative or helping her to organize something with frequency, meaning let's do more community events. Let's, maybe there's a loyalty program. Maybe there's something that could have been, or could be put in place, that may continue to resolve this hunger for community interaction. But for this instance, there was tension that led to this sort of organization of people, and so that's pretty big. The tension, and you put here, it lays in a logistical and emotional conflict of relocating bookstore. And that's just symptomatic. Moving somebody is logistics. That's, you know, perhaps it was exhausting for her to think that through, because maybe she had a store, and just like if you live in a house for 30 years, like moving is such a nightmare. So it could have been partially that, partially because it's a small town and maybe they don't have movers or don't have this sort of resource. So there may have been some logistics there, but I think the deeper emphasis is in her hunger to connect, given this particular example. Now again, this is what we're doing, is becoming sensitive to somebody's story and seeing their logic, trying to see through their eyes, trying to connect with them in a more meaningful way. And we may be absolutely off in our assumptions, but the point is that now we can have the narrative. We allow it to be informed. Through say she was a regular prospect or something, and you've understood this story, then this would be something that you could talk to, this sort of element in her experience. Could you speak to that?
The goal here isn't necessarily to arrive at a flawless conclusion about someone's story. It's about developing a heightened sensitivity to the narrative elements that influence their decisions and experiences. By trying to understand the logic that drives someone's actions, we create opportunities for more meaningful conversations. We can test our assumptions through dialogue, ask insightful questions, and refine our understanding as we learn more about their journey. In Michelle's case, we might not have the full picture, but we have enough to form a hypothesis about her motivations and the tension she's navigating. We see that her desire for community engagement might stem from a deeper need for connection, both for herself and for her bookstore as a community space. This insight can guide us in how we might approach her with future opportunities, whether that's suggesting community-focused initiatives or simply engaging with her on a level that acknowledges her values. Ultimately, this narrative approach enriches our interactions. It helps us move beyond surface level engagement into a space where we can build trust, offer relevant support, and create lasting relationships based on a true understanding of the person or organization we're engaging with.
Wonderful. Now, it's important in this that we understand environmental and business context. So, in looking at her story, we should allow her environment and business context to inform our hypothesis. So, you've gathered Chelsea, Michigan is a town, roughly 5,300 residents with a strong local identity. Independent bookstores often serve as cultural hubs, and Michelle's business depended heavily on in-person engagement. The move posed both risk and opportunity, solved by turning it into a ritual, which is great. That's fantastic. And I would agree that I think the hunger lies deeper within her. So although we may feel like this particular situational story or story cycle is complete, there's an inference, there's a tension, because we're talking about a human need, and human needs need to not just be fulfilled once. We don't just eat once, um, but they're fulfilled regularly. And so the analysis here that we concluded was Michelle's case reflects a unique type of small business leadership storytelling through action. A book brigade created connection, publicity, and ownership across the town. It also reframed a typical operational headache with moving and inventory. Then we look at in this diagnostic tool, case study as a tool, the 8 essential story elements breakdown is a did it have character? Was there characters in there? Yes. Character traits? Yes. Motive? Yes. Intention? Yes. Action? Yes. Obstacles? Yes. Overcome resolutions? Yes. Meaning? Yes. And the verdict was that all 8 story elements are present. So if this is a closed story, which we thought about it carefully, and there in our as our tool, there's a lot of questions. So this is an example of what we would conclude or how we would conclude, but the rigor it takes to have this conclusion will be much more informed. I mean, the questions are very rigorous, and so it's important to go through the questions that we will provide in this particular tool. But this really helps to break down these things. Now, if there was no resolution, then this might give us an opportunity to come in under the right principle, under appropriate communication style, these sort of things that would help us to gain favor with her and to have a meaningful interaction with this individual. Now, so this also, like, this is a diagnostic tool, so it's maybe not appropriate for certain relationships or certain transactions in our lives. Meaning, we don't want to go through this if we're selling a $5 item or Jolly Ranchers or something. That would be ridiculous. But this would be a good tool for like stakeholders or business partnerships, or some of the more relevant relationships that have consequence. That's important. But yeah, this was kind of a breakdown of this tool and how it works. And although the tool will be released in the future, we have it lined up, first providing a workshop and then releasing the tool. That we do hope, or I hope, that this sort of insight has provided some value in thinking about people's narratives, and thinking about where there's tension, thinking about what is involved in the story cycle. Has that been resolved? Is there a place for me here? Because people often also will say, they will also infer and tell us that we could help them. But is the evidence present? Is there tension in any one of these areas? And are they kind of just stringing us along for some reason? And the consequence is wasted time, wasted effort on somebody who is not going to be of any consequence, who's just a mirage. So would you speak to that in closing? And then
Absolutely. Here's a deeper, more thoughtful written conclusion that brings everything together: the diagnostic framework, the narrative logic, the case study reflections, and the emotional heart behind it all. Closing reflections: narrative as diagnosis, connection, and compass. What we're exploring here isn't just storytelling, it's story sensing, a disciplined, thoughtful process of identifying the logic of someone's lived experience through narrative structure. It's the practice of meeting someone where they are, not through assumptions or persuasion, but by honoring the underlying story they're actively living, even when they can't yet articulate it themselves. In our conversation, we introduced a diagnostic tool grounded in the essential elements of story: character, motive, action, conflict, outcome, and more. These aren't just abstract concepts, they're human constants. They show up everywhere: in boardrooms and classrooms, in community centers, in crisis calls, in strategy decks, and sidewalk conversations. They're the recurring architecture behind how people make sense of their world. We've talked about the hero's journey, but reframed it not as a myth or metaphor, but as a working model, one that can help us orient ourselves and others inside the complexity of transition, challenge, and growth. We've looked at situational stories, temporary arcs within longer lives, as containers of tension, clarity, and change. And most importantly, we've anchored all of this in observation over assumption, questioning over categorizing, and relationship over reduction. The real power here is relational. By using story not to perform but to perceive, we gain access to someone's interior logic, their real-time sense of what matters, what's at stake, what's unresolved. This isn't about labeling them. It's about earning the right to engage more deeply. When we can name the tension someone is navigating, whether it's a misaligned motive, a stalled action, or a conflict they can't yet face, we can build tools, offers, conversations, and systems that actually fit their reality. That's what makes this not just a narrative model, but a leadership model, a teaching model, a diagnostic model for transformation. And if you're listening to this and wondering how to apply it, start small. Pick one conversation this week. Don't just hear what someone is saying. Listen for the story behind it. What chapter might they be in? Where might the tension sit? What would it mean to meet them not with answers, but with the right question at the right moment? That's the gift of this work. We don't have to know everything. We just have to care enough to notice what's already there and to walk with people through their story, not in front of it. Because that's where the real value lives. Not in fixing stories for others, but in helping them claim, shape, and navigate their own.